Well, hello everyone, I am back again for another update. I have not put out a video in a while. I am currently on my front porch. I just got done mowing my lawn here. And suffered some bee stings in the process as I was trying to move something and there was a bee's nest unknowingly under it, but I'm okay. What I'm going to talk about here is I've been hearing headlines about global warming again, heat waves all across the U.S. supposedly. Record warm sea temperatures, water temperatures 100 degrees off Florida coast, supposedly, or they claim. The truth is, are we really burning up? Has global warming just simply gotten out of hand? Most of you listen to my previous videos have an idea as to how I'm going to answer that question. The climate, as I've talked about, relates to the level of solar activity we experience is what controls our climate. The sun is variable in its output from year to year, from decade to decade, from century to century. The solar activity varies, and that does affect our climate, whether warmer or colder than we presently see today. We know that in times past, little ice age, the climate was colder than today. From 1850 on, year 1850, there has been genuine global warming going on, but it has nothing to do with man's activities and everything to do with solar activity, which changed its levels from that point to now. During the 20th century, we enjoyed relatively high solar activity for most of that century, the 20th century, leading to a very benign climate free of extremes for the most part. Slightly warmer than now, especially the 30s were warmer because activity levels were higher of the sun. As well as the 80s, and as well, 1980 was a very hot summer, but it did not equal the heat of the summers of the 30s, especially 1936, which still holds the record for the most heat in the U.S. Has not been challenged. And so climate has varied from decade to decade, from year to year, century to century. Again, the 20th century was a very benign period compared to most of the Earth's history. The sun was very regular in its activity. It was higher. Cycles were very regular during that century, leading to a very regular climate with not that many extremes other than the Dust Bowl of the 30s. We had solar cycle 20 in the 70s, which was a bit weaker. It's led to a bit of a cool down and a bit more of variability in the weather during the 70s. We did have a few severe winters, but for the most part, most of the 20th century, its climate was very benign. Since year 2007, however, solar activity has become reduced in solar output. 2005, we had a bumper crop of hurricanes, tropical storms, because the oceans that year were genuinely warm. Had a lot of heat content from the previous decades of higher solar activity, but Beginning about 2006, 2007, we went into solar cycle 24. And that led to a beginning of a reversal of the climate trends of global warming to global cooling. Around 2007, the trend reversed. Why do I say 2007? Because that's the year we stopped getting hurricanes. Or the hurricanes beginning to decrease, meaning that ocean temperatures are beginning to cool around that year. The U.S. experienced a drought of hurricane landfalls that lasted over a decade. But then around 2015, 2016, we suddenly saw landfalling hurricanes return. But I don't believe that was a natural trend. What happened was they had to do something about this trend of... They developed technology to try to create hurricanes where they normally would not form, to get it past the threshold to where they could actually trigger hurricanes to develop where they naturally might not, to get it over the threshold. And that, for a few years, they got away with doing this. And we saw an increase in hurricanes. It was not due to a genuine increase in sea temperatures. It was more due to interference with the process to get a hurricane to form by injecting energy into disturbances that would push them across the threshold where they might not have naturally to form into storms. My prediction is that if the trend in solar activity continues, hurricanes, tropical storms are going to become obsolete in the next 10 years. It will go the way of the dinosaur. The reason why I say that is because this advanced technology has taken a lot of heat energy out of that water. They're forming disturbances, forming cloud masses where they normally might not have. The sun's energy is not reaching the water under these clouds or under these showers, under these storms that develop. If they do manage to develop another storm, that takes a tremendous amount of heat out of that water that may not have been otherwise taken out. So sea temperatures are actually falling. They're not record high. We don't really see any more hurricanes developing naturally anymore. Anything that develops is artificial, has to be enhanced to form into anything. My prediction is eventually so much energy is going to be taken out of that water that they're not going to be able to anymore get these disturbances over the threshold to form into actual storms anymore. Especially if solar activity remains at below average or below 20th century levels. This trend is going to continue. Also, the winters as a whole began getting colder from 2007 on. The trend reversed. We had mild winters, which they still claim the winters are getting milder, even though around 2007 the trend began to reverse. The reason why this past winter, though, was so mild, especially in the eastern U.S., was, again, as I touched on, they even developed technology to enhance the MJO in the wintertime to be in the warmer phases by taking heat energy out of the water around Indonesia to form disturbances where they might not have otherwise formed, rain showers, thunderstorms, injecting heat energy into these areas to draw it out of the water. What this is going to do is have a net cooling effect on the waters there over the next few years. They may get away with it for a couple more years, but eventually they're going to fall flat as well with that. And the reason why they're doing this is, again, because the trend for winters in the eastern U.S. has gotten colder and snowier since 2007. The decade in New York City of 2010-2020 featured way above average snowfall as a whole during that decade. They're trying to put the MJO, keep it locked in warm phases to try to stem that trend, because this flies in the face of the agenda of global warming. We were supposed to not get any more snow in the winter anymore. And for a while that was happening because the natural trend was warming up until, like I say, 2007 or so. The Arctic ice went down to a record low in 2007, and there was a grain of truth that by 2014 the ice might be gone if the trends continued. But again, 2007, a reversal happened because of a decline in solar activity to very low levels. We are in a solar max of cycle 25 right now. It is slightly stronger than 24, it appears, at the moment, but has it peaked out now? Is it going to start declining? Is it going to go a little higher in the next couple of years? Remains to be seen, but overall, it's another below average cycle. In spite of being stronger than 24, likely the trend of global cooling is going to continue into the decades ahead. We are entering a new regime, solar activity, it appears, and the benign weather of the 20th century is gone. We're already suffering much more extreme weather. Of course, they're blaming this on global warming. The heat wave out in Arizona, for example, they're blaming that on man-made global warming. However, that heat wave is actually being caused by a lack of monsoon moisture. Normally, around the first week of July, the subtropical high migrates north of Arizona up into the Four Corners or into Utah, Colorado. This draws monsoonal moisture northward from Mexico into Arizona and causes the weather to get rainier and cooler. Obviously, rain's going to cool the temperatures. If that high pressure fails to migrate north, stays over Arizona the whole summer, we end up with record heat instead, and they don't get their monsoon. And they end up with no rain to cool them. So in a sense, global cooling could actually cause the summers in Arizona to be hotter because they're not going to get that monsoon. The high is not going to migrate north like it usually does. It's going to stay over Arizona the whole summer. This global high pressure system encircles the whole Earth at that latitude. If it fails to move north, it inhibits hurricane development in the Atlantic. And hurricanes cannot develop under this high pressure system. They have to have that high pressure system north of to feed off of to encourage the circulation. If the high is sitting right over the Caribbean the whole summer, very difficult to get a hurricane. Or over the western Atlantic, north of South America, if that high fails to migrate north to Bermuda, instead sits over Puerto Rico or somewhere between Bermuda and Puerto Rico, it's going to be very difficult to get hurricanes to form in these areas. Which is why my prediction is eventually these storms are going to go the way of the dinosaur unless solar activity picks up again. They're not going to be able to enhance these storms forever. Eventually too much energy is going to be drawn out of that water. They're not going to be able to push these systems over the threshold to get them to form into storms anymore. The question is, for this winter, of course, they talk about this El Nino, which I question whether there really is an El Nino right now, because the weather in Australia is not supporting it. It's getting a lot of rain and cool temperatures in Australia, El Nino means hot and dry. So I kind of sense that this is just a big propaganda. They're going to blame this quote-unquote El Nino on global warming, man-made climate change to get everybody to adopt the policies they're trying to push, blaming the extreme weather on it when it's the opposite causing the extreme weather, the reduction in solar activity. So that's enough for that discussion. I do have to be in work at 3 o'clock today. I'm still working at that restaurant. They had me working from Friday 3 o'clock to 8, and then Saturday and Sunday all day, Monday 7:30 to 5:30, and then I'm off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. For now, unfortunately, I have to continue working. I did get rid of my truck. I traded it in for another vehicle, but still owe money on it, unfortunately. So my goal is to get the vehicle paid off. Next year, I do reach retirement age. I'm hoping to quit and collect from that point on. Still have a long distance hike or bike tour in mind. And that is going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this discussion on climate and weather and are open-minded enough to see a different perspective on it.